In the year 1492, Columbus discovered America. 7 years later, while further expeditions were being conducted by Columbus's followers, something very different was happening in Germany. On January 29, 1499, a baby girl was born to Hans and Anna von Bora. They named her Katharina. 5 years later, following her mother's death, Katharina was sent to live in a convent. There she was raised and educated by nuns until she was about 10 years old. In 1509, she moved to the Nimschen cloister. When she turned 16, she followed in the footsteps of 2 aunts and took her vows to live forever within the 4 walls of that convent. However, Katharina von Bora was born to live in an age of religious revolution, and she was destined to play a vital role in changes that would sweep through the entire Western world, turning country against country and influencing some of the greatest minds of the Renaissance. In order to truly appreciate and understand the decisions that Katharina would make as she grew older, we need to examine a revolution that was about to spring up within the Roman Catholic Church. During this time, the Church began printing and selling indulgences, a new way of raising funds that encouraged people to buy their ancestors out of purgatory. Close to the Nimschen cloister in the nearby town of Wittenberg, the church salesman Tetzel peddled these indulgences to rich and poor alike. As soon as the gold in the casket rings, the ransomed soul to heaven springs. One particular monk in this town, Martin Luther, found these indulgences and the way Tetzel sold them intolerable. He had been struggling with what would become of his soul after death, and through diligent study of the Bible, had come to understand that he could be saved only through faith, and could definitely not buy his way into heaven. He wrote and sent off letters, asking his superiors to stop the sales. He also wrote out his now famous 95 Theses or Ideas, arguing that indulgences were wrong. On All Saints' Day, or October 31st, 1517, he posted these theses on the chapel door of Wittenberg. The Pope, Leo X, first responded to this very mildly. He told one of Luther's superiors to keep him quiet. Others, such as John Eck, had immediately written pamphlets and papers, denouncing Luther and his positions. Luther stood his ground and wrote responses to these, forcing the Pope to take him more seriously. Luther and the Pope butted heads many times, resulting in Luther's excommunication from the Roman Catholic Church on June 15, 1520. The fight did not end there, though. During his fights with the Pope, Luther had gained a multitude of followers, including Frederick the Wise, an elector of Germany, and Philip Melanchthon, a close friend and fellow reformer. Luther and his followers publicly burned the papal bull excommunicating him in many towns across Germany. The Pope reacted to this with a volley of threats, on several occasions attempting to have Luther executed. Nevertheless, it is amazing how quickly the beliefs of Luther and his followers reached out and encompassed the whole world. The Reformation reached out its fingers everywhere, influencing Albrecht Dürer, the Northern Leonardo, Erasmus, the great humanist, and John Calvin, who started a Reformed church and community in Geneva, Switzerland. In the nearby Nimschen cloister, the nuns particularly responded favorably to Luther's teachings. Katharina von Bora and 11 other nuns in the cloister became convinced that the establishment to which they had promised their lives was wrong. They began writing to Luther, explaining that they wanted to escape from the cloister because of what he was teaching. In his response, he advised them to be cautious and honestly examine their motives for wanting to leave. If they found that their ideas coincided with biblical teachings, he gave them his blessings and assistance in their endeavor. They obviously found their reasons righteous, for one night in 1523, with the help of a fish merchant, Leonard Cope of Torgau, the 12 nuns escaped from the Nimschen cloister. According to popular legend, they hid themselves in fish barrels Leonard Cope had brought, until they reached safety in Wittenberg. One student wrote, "A wagon full of Vestal virgins has just come to town, all more eager for marriage than life. May God give them husbands, lest worse befall." Martin Luther personally found homes for the nuns, whose families would not have them back. Katharina von Bora had 2 suitors after the escape, one of whom she was actually engaged to for a short period. However, the engagement soon ended, probably because of his family's aversion to an escaped nun. The second was a co-worker of Martin Luther's, but Katharina refused to have anything to do with him. Finally, in 1525, on June 13th, Luther himself married Katharina. This was a major development in the Reformation. A monk and a nun married? Before this, such a thing had seemed unthinkable, even impossible, for such actions were punishable by death. But Martin and Katharina Luther were leaders in this new development, and approached their new life with courage. Their marriage forever changed the way that the clergy viewed their lifestyle. To this day, Catholic priests do not marry, but Reformed ministers have no such prohibition. Luther moved his wife to Zulzdorf, which Katharina quickly took control of running. Because of Luther's extremely important position among the reformers, Katharina troubled him with as little as possible concerning the well-being of their home. A true entrepreneur, she opened her own pig market. In a letter to a family friend, Justice Jonas, Luther described the work Katharina put into running their farm.
"My caddy, who rides, drives, sows her fields, buys cattle and turns them out on the meadows, and brews, sends you her regards."
In a letter of invitation to him, Luther enticed him with the fact that Caddy had brewed 216 gallons of beer. Running a farm, pig market, and brewery was just one facet of her support. She also housed and fed numerous colleagues and students of Luther. Zulzdorf was a converted monastery, so she often had room for 30 visitors at once. Her passion and dedication to the Reformation is evident by the fact that she took care of so many people. The Luthers had 6 children: Hans, Elizabeth, Magdalena, Martin, Paul, and Margareta. In 1527, shortly after the birth of Hans, fear gripped the whole of Wittenberg as the plague swept through. While caring for little Hans, pregnant with Elizabeth, and suffering a mild case of the plague, Katharina turned her house into a hospital. In 1528, baby Elizabeth died, filling the Luther home with sadness. But joy once again filled their home with the birth of Magdalena in 1529, followed closely by 2 sons and another daughter. Grief once again seized them in 1542, when Magdalena, at 13, died. Luther wrote of his and Katharina's great grief, marveling at how everything they did would bring her image before them, causing them to sob and sigh at every remembrance. Once again they comforted themselves with their other children. Luther wrote many letters, telling of their great pride and joy in each of them. Filled with admiration for his wife, Luther wrote many letters praising her. However, it is the titles that he bestowed on her that disclose the most about who she was.
"A beautiful wife, or should I say lord, the morning star of Zulzdorf, your grace, Doctoress Katharina, the lady of Zulzdorf, the deeply learned lady, my dearly beloved housewife, Katharina Luther, owner of Zulzdorf and the Sow Market, and whatever else she may be."
From all of this, we can paint a clear picture of who she was. She was a loving wife and mother, a conscientious housewife, and an industrious farmer. She used all of her strengths for the benefit of her family, always caring for them and providing them with a comfortable home, and for the furtherance of Luther's work and her convictions. Because of Katharina and her feisty strong will, the Reformation influenced the art and writings of the Renaissance, changed the development of Europe through wars such as the 30 Years' War, and changed the way people thought about certain subjects, such as marriage. But would capitalism and socialism, the world's 2 biggest economic systems, have developed in the same way if the Reformation had never occurred? Would America, whose founders were, for the most part, raised as Protestants, have the same democratic government? Would literature have developed the same way, or would most books still be religious writings? Would our society, which is heavily influenced by a multitude of different cultures and religions, be as tolerant of diversity? The questions are almost endless. Katharina von Bora set a wonderful example of a strong and courageous woman. If she hadn't been such a strong woman, willing to put her whole life behind what she believed, Luther would not have been able to accomplish all that he did. The Reformation would not have spread as rapidly or as far, and the way that we live today would be drastically different. She not only was an exemplary wife and mother, farmer and businesswoman, but she also helps pave the road for the great Protestant Reformation.